Everyone tells you to switch to Elk Riders, but is this actually worth it? Because if you play Call of Dragons and you start looking for the best cavalry, you will very quickly run into this advice. People say our Elk Riders are better than Knights, that Spring Quarter Cavalry is stronger, or that you should switch if you want to play a cavalry properly. But here is the problem: most players who say that don't actually explain the difference between the Elk Riders and human cavalry. And because of that, a lot of players switching thinking they are upgrading, when in reality they're just changing their entire playstyle without realizing it. So in Call of Dragons Cavalry Guide, I'm going to explain the real difference between Elk Riders and Human Knights or Wildeburg Knights, how melee cavalry compares to the hybrid range cavalry style, and which one you should actually use depending on how you play your game. Because this is not which cavalry is better, this is about understanding what your cavalry is supposed to do. When you look at the human knights in Call of Dragons, you're looking at the pure classic version of cavalry. This is melee cavalry. This is the type of units that want to close the distance, stay in contact, and win a fight by committing. When you engage by knights, your goal is simple. You get on top of your target, you should stay there, and you pressure them until they entire retreat or die. Until they either retreat or die. That's why knights feel so natural for most players. If you even play cavalry in any strategy game, this is exactly what you're expecting. Fast engage, strong presence, and direct damage. Now compare that to the Elk Riders. Elk Riders are still cavalry, but they don't behave like melee cavalry. And this is where most players get confused. When people search for Elk Riders against Knights Call of Dragons, they expect a stat comparison. But the real difference is not just the stats, it's the behavior. It's not your attack or defense or HP or something like this. Is the behavior of these troops. Elk Riders don't want to fully commit to the same way knights do. Instead of focusing direct contact, they play more around movement, positioning, and controlled pressure. You're still dealing damage, but you're doing it in the way that keep you safer, where you can reposition, adjust, and avoid getting punished. So instead of thinking about Elk Riders as strong cavalry, you should think of them as a different category of cavalry. They sit somewhere between cavalry and range playstyle. Not fully ranged, but definitely not pure melee. And this is why so many players make the wrong decision. They switch to Elk Riders expecting strong cavalry, but what they actually did is switching to a more advanced, more positioning heavy style without changing how they're playing. And this is where the things start go wrong. Here's the most important difference you need to understand if you want to choose the best cavalry in Call of Dragons. Knights win fights by committing, Elk Riders win fights by controlling the fight. When you play Knights, you want to engage, you want to close the distance, force interaction, and stay in combat. Your strength comes from pressure and presence. You are dangerous because once you're on the target, you don't let them play comfortably. When you're playing with Elk Riders, you don't want that same kind of commitment. You want a controlled distance, take smarter trades, and avoiding situation where you get walked into the bad fights. Your strength comes from positioning and decision making, not just raw engagement. That is a completely different mindset. And this is exactly where Knights are better for most players. If you're playing Call of Dragons and you just want strong cavalry for PvP, Knights are the safer and more consistent option. They're easier to use, they are easier to understand, and they perform better in chaotic fights where you don't have time for micro perfectly. When fights get messy, when there are multiple players, when everything is happening at once, Knights still do their job. You engage, you pressure, you create a value. Elk Riders don't work the same way. If you don't control your positioning, if you overcommit, or if you misread the fight, you lose value very quickly. That's why some players switch to Elk Riders and suddenly feel weaker. It's not because the unit is bad, it's because the unit required a different level of control. But this doesn't mean Elk Riders are bad, it just means they are more specialized. If you're the kind of players who like movement, positioning and controlling the fights, or forcing them, Elk Riders can actually feel very strong. They give you more flexibility, they allow you to avoid bad traits, and they let you play Cavalry in smarter, more controlled way. But that's only work if you're actually playing them correctly, because if you try to play Elk Riders like Knights, you're going to lose. This is a mistake. So when you're choosing between Elk Riders and Human Cavalry in Call of Dragons, don't ask which one is better. Ask how you want to play. Very important. If you want simple, aggressive, high impact Cavalry that's work in almost every situation, then Human Knights are the better choice. They give you consistency, they give you clear value, they match the nature way most players approach the Cavalry. If you want more advanced style, where positioning matter more, where the control fights instead of forcing them, and where you rely on movement and decision making, then Elk Riders become the better option. But that choice only makes sense if you understand what you're giving up. Because if you're not just switching units, you're switching playstyles. So here's the final answer. For most players in Call of Dragons, Human Knights are the better Cavalry. They're easier, more reliable, and stronger in typical PvP situation. Elk Riders are not the default upgrade. They're the specialist option. They become strong only when used correctly and only when your playstyle matches what they are designed to do. And this is why blindly switching to Elk Riders is one of the most common mistakes I see in Call of Dragons, because people don't realize they're not upgrading, they're just changing how the game needs to be played. So this is my couple words over Elk Riders against Human Knights or Wilderberg Knights. This is what I think, especially when I start actually investing in Cavalry lately. I go very deep in the Cavalry, and this is my opinion over the Elk Riders and Human Knights, because I see a lot of discussions in this direction. If you go that far in this video, congratulations, hit one like on the video, thank you very much. And yeah, let me know your comments in the comment below. What you think? Do you play Knights? Do you play Elk Riders? And yeah, wish you a great day and see you in the next video.